Well, so today I tore around the 4.3. It's a Vortex '01 GMC Sonoma, same as the S10. But anyway, my son was driving it. Said he was getting off the exit ramp, and it just kind of cut off on him. And I went with the trailer and picked it up. It would start up and run, if I was giving it some gas pedal, so it would at least stay running. But it was running like crap. So anyway, I could hear a little ticking type, actually pretty good ticking type sound up front here. So I didn't know if something had happened in a rocker or like a spring breaking or push rod getting bent, anything. I don't know. But I also figured, it might have jumped time. So I went ahead and pulled it down. It doesn't appear to have jumped time, but the chain is pretty doggone warm. As you can see, there is a lot of slop here. Way too much for my liking, because it's got slop on both sides too. Not alright, and of course it could possibly jump or very soon. But anyway, it turns out after all this crap of tearing it down, which I'm glad I did, I went ahead and got the Cloy's kit to go back in it, the chain and gears. But I wound up finding out the skipping was probably just from the cap here. I mean, there's no button left here. It's usually a spring-loaded button here that's, or not even always spring-loaded, because sometimes the rotor itself, the little tip right there, in the center, it's kind of spring-loaded feeling. But anyway, yes, the new cap, I've got the new cap, wires, all the junk. I'm going to go ahead and tune it up, new plugs. And let me just show you real quick here for the people that don't know. But yeah, you can see the difference there. And of course, all the posts are nice because it's new. And the other one is a little, they're not extremely bad, but they do have some junk on them. But that's the main thing. There was nothing there for the coil wire to send any spark through the plug, so that's why it was running so crappy and showing a misfire code. But I just kind of figured it was the timing chain to start with. Wish I would have just pulled the cap, checked it. But then I don't know what the ticking sound was, except because I don't see anything worn inside, where it looks like the chain was hitting. But maybe because it was just running so crappy. I'm not sure. And it was just making, maybe one of the cylinders wasn't even firing on the front there. But I don't know what's going on. I'll put it back together and fire it up and see what we got. So today the little S10 is taking me for a run, for a loop. I wound up putting the timing chain and gears right back on, because even the new Cloy's, made in the US, had just as much slack. I guess as long as it's under a ½ inch, when you actually push it one way and push it the other, don't just let it sit, and then think you're going to push it over. That way it's only in the 3/8 range probably, which is good, But yeah, it was under a half, so it's supposed to be within spec. And to be honest, the gears looked about like the new ones. The teeth wasn't all wore down or anything, or discolored too bad or anything, where they looked like they'd been getting hot in a spot. So put all that back together. Found the button in the cap here was bad. Can't remember if I'd mentioned that in the video yesterday or whatever. But anyway, and then I wound up, I put the new cap on, just put the stock wires back to start it up, just see how it was going to do, because I wanted to see was there sound up in this area. So I'm sitting there watching with the valve cover off on this side, thinking there would be a problem in the front is where it sounded like the issue was, but the very back rocker was barely even doing anything at all. So this is the push rod here. I don't know what made it bend. I had another one out of one of my Mercruiser Vortec engines, the Mercruiser boat motor. So anyway, I wound up, I put that push rod in, same length, turned it over by hand. It was getting full motion out of the rocker. That, it didn't seem like the lifter or anything or cam lobe was wiped out at the moment. So started it up. All the rockers were moving good, but it had a very bad skip. So I went ahead and pulled this side and they appear to be moving full motion when I'm just going through by turning it by hand. But I guess I'm going to go ahead and pull some plugs, and of course it's easier just to go in right here, and that way you can get to the spark plugs, all three of them in a row. I'm going to go ahead and pull all the plugs out, do a compression check, see if I got any real low cylinders, and I may go ahead and just pull all the push rods real quick and roll them and just see, make sure none of them are bent. Yeah, well that sucks, because I do have damage to that. I can tell just by looking across the rockers, or at least the valves, that very back one, and I know it's going to be hard to tell on the camera, but I can tell looking at it with my eye that that particular one back there is a little lower, and so it's telling me the valve is not seating. I just did a compression check, and that back cylinder has 0. So, and that very last rocker, I can get a little play, and I don't think it's the lifter. It's because the valve is down just a little, because it's bent somewhere along the seat area. So I don't know what the heck made that happen. I guess we'll have to take the head off. So I started pulling stuff off, like the front of the motor. I just laid the power steering pump down in here. I need to redo the pressure line anyway. It's been leaking a little, it looks like, making a mess. So I could just unhook it and get it out of the way, but for right now, I really want to dig into the engine on this side, get the head off, because I want to see if the piston is damaged or not, the cylinder wall. As long as that's okay, then I'll continue and do everything correctly. But for right now, I'm just kind of taking everything apart. Took like the heater hoses out, took my AC stuff out of the way here, because I have a AC machine. I recovered everything, and I just wanted to get the dryer and all out of the way here, so I can take this head and do that head gasket if I'm going to do this side. And I got the intake and everything off, and what the heck, I might as well do it. But again, I want to get everything disassembled and check this side, make sure that the motor is even worth messing with before I go any further with it. Since the radiator was just sitting there, I mean, it seemed kind of senseless not to pop the clips real quick and undo the 2 trans lines, just lift it out, set it over to the side, just so nothing falls up against it and does any damage, because it's a brand new radiator I put in a couple months ago. So why make a mistake and have something fall up against it and mess up some fins and all. But anyway, so just going to go ahead and continue taking a few things off, unplugging the harness and getting the main harness off the top of the injector set up, and get like the fuel rail undone back there, and figure out what I'm going to do with the manifolds. I think I'm going to try to take the bolts out of the head and leave the manifold hooked up to the wide pipe. But let's get to it. And I think it's just easier to go ahead and get the harness all the way out of the way. You just undo your fuse block. It's got 1 7mm right there. You undo this big plug. Undo one of your little plugs here, just so there's room for the harness to go out of the way. Just flip this back over after you unplug the big. That's what was plugged into it. That way you can just put the whole harness on the other side of the motor and get it out of the way. Let's get the intake and distributor off. So I went ahead and just pulled the bracket off over here. It's only got the 3 little bolts, 2 bolts and a nut on the stud. Set the alternator, everything over on the side. I got everything laid out. Pretty much it's ready to pop the intake real quick. I just undid the fuel lines here on the top. You can undo them on the back side down here, but with the S10, it's so freaking close to the firewall there. I just rather undo it like this. Get it out of the way, but should be able to, I'll have to get a pry bar to pop that loose, but let me get the intake off real quick. Okay, intake off. Really can't tell anything. They do have wear, of course, but can't really tell any bad lifters or anything like that, or lobes actually ruined until I don't spot any push rods just completely bent now. The one on the end there is one I stuck in to replace the bent one, but nothing real obvious. I didn't take them out and roll them yet, but I don't see anything real obvious. So let's go ahead and get all these rockers and push rods out, try to get the head off. So I'm going to go ahead and zip all these off and set them over in the box here. It really doesn't matter which one you take it off. They're all the same down through there. But then I'll be able to actually inspect them manually and make sure, you know, if anything is wrong or not. I had already went down through there with the ratchet and broke them all loose, because it is like a little bit of a truss thing under there. But anyway, I broke them all loose and then just took the gun to zip them out. But let me pull all those rockers and push rods and throw them in the box here. And of course, I was sitting here taking the manifold bolts out along the head here, and I got to thinking to myself, wait a minute, I can't just leave it in there because I have to be able to get the external head bolts. You know, most of your long head bolts are here under the valve cover, but there are your outside bolts on the GM V6 and V8 like that. So I will have to get back under it and undo the little Y pipe there. Hopefully those 3 nuts come off there without stripping or breaking. So finally, after fighting with this stupid crap, the head is off. I'll probably wind up doing the other side just because I'm so far in. The head gasket seemed to be fine. As a matter of fact, it did not want to let loose. I wasn't having any issues there. I don't know what in the hell made this bend a valve. And as you can see, this top one here bent pretty bad. She's not going to shut. Should be like that. Those are the little intake valve. And it definitely should not be bent like that. I could even tell by looking down the valve springs. You can see they're all in a row except that one. All the tops of the valves. So, of course, that means it makes contact with the piston to bend it, and that's what I have been so worried about, is I just wanted to get in here and see it. Now, of course, you know, it did make contact. It does not appear to actually be cracked or anything. Thankfully, the pistons are soft enough material. It absorbed it, and there is a valve relief cut into it, you know, to kind of help, but maybe after the valve, I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, definitely looks like it's worth cleaning up. Now I can order my headset for it. I was not wanting to order anything, waste of money, until I seen if there was any damage to the actual piston in the lower end. Then I'd just be putting another motor or replacing, or just selling the truck or whatever. But whew, this way I'll know what's in it. It'll be nice and good and clean, new gaskets on the whole top end. All right, so I've been gone. I've been in Florida enjoying the weather. And now I'm back home, South Carolina. So I had a used valve, of course. That's what I do around the shop here. But anyway, now I can see they're all nice and in line down through there. But I just took and lapped it or whatever, you know, with some grinding compounds I got here, of course, in the fine. But went ahead and seated it in. It was the exhaust valve here. There is one little nick type, not even a nick, it's just a little something going on there where the other bent valve hit it, but luckily it didn't contact the seat or anything, and it cleaned up good. So now I'm just going to clean up the surface real good and pull the truck back down in here and get it where get the block cleaned up. I got a whole new headset with new bolts and everything for it. Alright, so I went ahead and cleaned up the block. I'm just going to do this one side, the head gasket, because that gasket, when I took it off, was in very nice shape. Everything was sealed good. It just bent a valve, so I had to take the head off. So I'm not even going to bother with the other side. It's a personal vehicle, so it's no big deal. And got it all cleaned up. Head is cleaned up. About to drop it on the block here, and I got all new head bolts. Came with the kit. Well, So I went ahead and torqued down the head, did the bolts in the sequence. You're supposed to do 22 foot-pound, and then they have a different degree angle on each size bolts. There's 3 different sizes, 3 different lengths. And that's just too difficult to do inside the vehicle like this, so especially with the steering column over here at the back, that bolt back there was very difficult to get to as far as trying to use any kind of angle, settings. So I went ahead and did 22, 45, and 65 around them. So we're going to run it like that. It's a standard small block, so or V6, either one, but we'll roll with that. Hope for the best. Now, don't forget your ground wire on the back of the head. There is a wire come out of the harness there. I had to go ahead and put that on now before I go putting the rest of the stuff in the way. Now's the fun part. I get to fight putting this exhaust manifold in on this side, and even though I do have this part of the column shaft loose with the booster and this stupid air line coming off here on the back of the manifold, does make it kind of difficult. But it would be a lot worse to try to put this pipe back on once the manifold's in there, so I'm just going to squeeze it back in like I pulled it out. It was kind of tight, but it works. So luckily I was able to pull the shaft off the column here, so I just had this little nub. Made it a lot easier to get the manifold in. I don't know, for some reason when I was trying to take it off, this shaft, it just didn't want to pull all the way off, and this time I just pulled it a little bit harder and it came off. So anyway, manifold's in, all the bolts tight, all that good stuff, and I guess I'm gonna put the push rods and rockers back on and get the valve covers on it. Alright, so I got my good old cheap Chinese gaskets on here. This was my kit I bought cheap on eBay, and whole headset with the bolts and everything. I put a bead of the gray down first, a good 1/4 inch thick bead at least at the front and the rear there of the valley. Then I put my gaskets down, so there is a little underneath, and then I always come back and put a little dab on top there, because that corner is where you'd have a leak. So anyway, went ahead and laid that down. Now I got to finish cleaning off the intake real quick with some brake clean, because I already took the little whiz wheel to it, which they don't get very dirty anyway because the way these are rubber gaskets, plastic and rubber, so not much sticks to it. But let's get the intake cleaned up, set her down on her. So I went ahead and put the intake on, most of the harness is hooked back up, and I put the spark plugs in, lowered the vehicle back down. I went in through the fender wells, much easier to put the plugs in from under the fenders, and just hooking stuff back up. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to take everything out the front, but see, of course, I did the time and checked the timing chain and all that stuff. So anyway, keep on trucking. Alright, so I went ahead and put a battery in it. I took and jumped the 2 transmission lines for the cooler with a piece of rubber hose, because I've been in there bumping it over. I got my compression gauge on #1 cylinder so I could get the crank lined up. I didn't have anybody around to bump the key, so I just put the compression gauge in where I could sit in the driver's seat and watch it, give it some bumps with the key till it come around, and I came out and made sure my mark was close, and I went ahead and lined it all the way up. So now the timing mark does match with the cover. I'm going to go ahead and pull the gauge out, go ahead and put that #1 spark plug in, drop my distributor in, have it set on time, go ahead and put my new wires, spark plug wires, and she should be ready to at least fire up. I'll leave it like it is on the front. I just want to hear the motor start, make sure that it's okay and worth continuing to go ahead and put everything else together the correct way. Alright, so another little quickie on the 4.3 Vortec, putting the distributor back in. I put a compression gauge over here in the #1 cylinder hole where I could see it from inside, because I don't have anybody here to bump the engine over. So I went inside, bumped the engine, let it build up a little. As soon as I seen it building compression, come out here to look at my timing mark. Lined up the timing mark with the balancer, timing mark here and on the cover. So now I know it was top dead center number 1. Come back here to my distributor. Drop the distributor in, and on these Vortec ones, they got the little arrow right here on the casing, and this is a non-adjustable housing. It's not like the old ones where you can just unloosen this clamp and turn the distributor housing to time it. This one pretty much is slotted on the actual housing where the clamp will not move, so you bolt it down, and when it's down flush, you have to make sure you're lined up with this. Now, the first time I dropped it in, the oil pump rod down there was turned a little, and I was a little bit off. I knew if I went and bumped the engine and the distributor would drop in as soon as it matched up. I came back around, and actually I lined it up with the compression gauge again to make sure I was on top dead center out here on my timing marks. Came back over, and I'm lined up here. So now she's pretty well in time. The computer will take care of the rest. Time to go ahead and put the cap on and get the plug wires on it. Let me see if I can fire it up. All right, let's see what she does. Should fire right up. Ooh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She's alive. Okay. That's a good sign. Now I can go ahead and continue putting everything back together. So I hate wasting money, and I always take these pulleys, Chryslers, Ford, GM, they're almost all the same. They usually run this 6203 bearing, so I just buy them on eBay, like 10 for 10 bucks. And got my little adapter out of the ball joint kit. It fits perfectly on the back side here. And I got a socket picked out the right size for the bearing. The outer edge of the bearing, of course, but the socket still fits in through here. So I'm going to knock this bearing out. Take this one, set it in. I got my little press over here, and I'll just press it in nice and straight. Alright, so got most of the stuff bolted back in. Putting the air box in now. I already put the steering shaft and all back in. Hooked everything up down in there. It's got the new power steering line. AC and everything's hooked back up. I didn't pull a vacuum and charge it yet, but I'll get around to that. Pretty much everything is back on this side. Need to go grab a battery and stick in there and fill it up with some coolant. And hope for the best. Should be good to go. Alright, so far so good. My first little test drive. I just left the shop. Seems to be doing good. I noticed my steering wheel is off some, but that's just how much play it had in it. I need to go have it aligned now. The play is definitely a lot better now that I did the steering shaft coupler. And I did a little bit of a turn on the gearbox.